let's take a look at the NBA's Atlantic Division. What happened in Summer League? There were some interesting performances, not as many high draft picks, but still some big numbers and guys that might have some sort of an impact this season. And one of those guys is Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I know who he played for. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create the account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We're available on all platforms. So I want to see a thumb. I want to see a comment. I want to see a bang. I want to see two of them. Bang, bang. Do that. Follow on audio and video and tell us what you think about these five teams in the Atlantic Division: Boston, Brooklyn, New York, the Philadelphia 76ers, and your mates, the Toronto Raptors. That's what we're covering. We're going through the Summer League performances across those five teams, what matters, what doesn't. And then tomorrow, there will be the Dynasty Rookie Re-Ranks. And then we're sort of done with the complete rookie analysis and the Summer League stuff. And we move into a bunch of other stuff leading into full draft season. We're going to still do a lot of Dynasty stuff, do a lot of Points League stuff, do a lot of Category League stuff over the next... How many days is it? I can tell you exactly how many days it is until the NBA season starts, because I do have those numbers in front of me. 91 days until the NBA season starts. So we're going to get into talking about that very, very soon. In fact, we'll do it right now. We'll start by talking about the reigning NBA champions, the Boston Celtics. And you would expect a team that was the reigning NBA champs to not have a particularly strong Summer League team. And I think that's fairly accurate. Let's talk about a guy that did really stand out. And that's the package himself, Jaden Springer. Now, Springer is a guy that was drafted by the Sixers, barely played. He is still incredibly young. This is year 4 for Jaden Springer. Year 4. And he's 2 years younger than Terrence Shannon. He's a year younger than Dalton Connect. He's not even 22 yet. He's very young. And we saw what you want. Now, this doesn't mean that he's going to get big minutes necessarily for the Celtics. That's not what that means. But 19 points and 3 threes. 3 threes. And this is part of his issue. He couldn't shoot, but he hit 50% of his threes. It's limited volume, obviously. But 19 and 3 with 4 assists and a steal. He was the 15th ranked player, 30th in points leagues through the Summer League. He played 29 minutes a game. He barely played when he came across in Philadelphia at the trade deadline to Boston, but as a guy that's still not 22, the experience was on show, and he showed the things that we wanted to see improve. He was able to shoot. Again, will it hold? Probably not. But it's as with always with these older players, performance like this is good, because if it wasn't like this, it would be a gigantic red flag. And someone like that we might be talking about later in this show. But Jaden Springer with a pretty solid production, I would say. The rest of the Celtics team, there wasn't a lot to get excited about. J.D. Davison's been on a two-way for a couple of years. I thought he was pretty good. He's one of the better passers and nearly always has been one of the better passers at Summer League. He averaged another 6 assists here. His problem, much like Springer's, has been shooting, and he shot okay here. Again, there's going to be Pritchard in front of him and White and Holiday and Springer, but maybe there is something for Davison as some sort of a third-string point guard, whether it's here or another team. He's the same age as Jaden Springer as well, so even though he has been around for a while on some two-ways, he's not particularly old. Neemias Queta was one of the best performers at Summer League. He had a -1 rank of 6th. He was 5th in Yahoo Points Leagues, averaging 40 points a game. 40 fantasy points, that is. He had 21 real-life points per game. He only played 2 games, but 9 rebounds, 2 blocks, 64 and 83 from the field and the line. Now, there is an opening, obviously, in Boston, because Kristaps Porzingis is out for, I don't know, October, November, December maybe, and then him and Al Horford will be very limited into the preserving them. Now, there's still Luke Cornett, there's Xavier Tillman, but Queta did enough for us to go, let's see what they do. How do they run it? I don't think Queta's going to start at all, but we know that Horford's going to sit back-to-backs. So Queta is going to have an opportunity. And this, again, as an older prospect, the Pastel Donata, he was able to put in good numbers. 2 blocks a game, 21 points, 64%. Like, that's all really good. Their first round pick was Baylor Shireman. It's going to be hard to see good rotation minutes, I would think, this season. He's played 27 minutes a night. The 4 assists, 5 rebounds, 2 threes. He only shot 25%, very common for rookies. But the things that were the strength of him was shooting, was volume, was rebounds, was assists, as a guy who's probably more of a 3/small ball 4, maybe a little bit at the 2, but enough there to go, okay, it's interesting enough. Not that this was a good team. He didn't put up big numbers because, we didn't put big numbers with a lot of other prospects around him, but solid enough. Jordan Walsh was the star of the Celtics Summer League last season. 9 points on 29% shooting as a second-year guy. He averaged a block and a steal, but the big problem with him coming out of college, and he is still really young as well, he's only 20, is that I don't know if the offense is ever there. It's not quite Ryan Dunn levels, but the offense and the shooting wasn't really there. And last year, he was tasked with a big usage role in Summer League. He scored pretty well and then never played. And he was better in the G League than he was here in these set of games, but it wasn't... it wasn't encouraging, shooting 13% from 3 and 29% overall. I don't think there's a significant role for him. The Celtics are basically all intact, and they just gave Sam Hauser an extension, so Walsh is going to be sort of battling with Shireman as that 10th, 11th, 12th guy, I would guess. Anton Watson was their second-round pick. At the moment, I don't believe he has been signed. He is a little bit older. He's almost 24. 12 points, 5 rebounds, shot the ball well. Like, I thought he was polished enough, and I do think that there is a chance out of that Shireman, Walsh, Watson, Troika. What a word Troika is. Out of that triumvirate, there is a small chance to me that Watson turns into the better pro and better fantasy producer per minute over the next 5 years. Or Watson may never crack any rotation ever, but I've got a little bit of faith in him. He's a little bit of a very, very dark horse guy that I was interested with what he produced. Drew Peterson is a guy that was on a 2-way for this team last year. I believe he's still on a 2-way, but he's almost 25 now. I don't think that old Drewy is going to turn into an NBA caliber player necessarily. Unlucky for him. Today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. I don't know if you know this, but Game Time is now an officially licensed ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball. So when you're going to go to a game, you want Game Time because not only are they going to get you tickets, because that's obviously it's the name of the game. If they were a ticket app and they couldn't get you tickets, well, they might as well pack it in. But they can do that. That's the basics covered. But they do other things too because they have this great thing. And it's part of why they're called Game Time is that as we get closer to game time, the tickets get cheaper. And they'll be sending you flash deals. Go, hey, something's going on. We've got some tickets available for a game tonight. Do you want to go? And you say, of course I do, Game Time. What else would I be doing here? And they give you those discounted prices. Plus, the all-in pricing shows you the price bang on. You don't need to guess or to worry about transaction fees. It is all included in the price that they show you. So, your first step here is to just download the Game Time app. The second step is to go and create an account, of course. And that helps you take the guesswork out of buying tickets, Major League Baseball games, and other events also. You download the app, you create the account, and then you use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and that gets you $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, go create that account, download the app, in the other order actually, and then use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay, so that's the Celtics done. Don't forget also Locked On Sports Today live 24/7 YouTube channel where you can get inside local experts, all teams, all leagues, running 24/7 instead of having to watch coverage on the Lakers/Yankees/Cowboys. If you are a fan of American sports and your team list is Yankees, Cowboys, Lakers, it's interesting, isn't it? Shout out to LeBron. Let's talk about the Brooklyn Nets, who could be or offered us the single most egregious isn't the right word, but I like saying the word egregious. The most distinct notice of any team that we are tanking, trading away Mikal Bridges and saying we're just going to be bad. The Nick Claxton signing maybe pushes back against that a little bit, but of course this is a team that you think, well, they're tanking, they're bad already. So they must have some good young prospects to throw out there. Well, no, they didn't have a single draft pick in this last draft. That doesn't mean there weren't interesting players and interesting performances from this Summer League team, but not a single draft pick. So with a team that's bad, and he's deliberately trying to be bad, and no current draft players to prioritize, we've got to look at the other young guys on the team because that's where some of the value is going to come. And this guy was the Summer League MVP. Now, we could very easily argue that he shouldn't have been the Summer League MVP, and I will argue that because he wasn't the best player there. And then somehow he didn't make first team or Summer League, which, again, makes how can he be the best player, but also not in the best 5 players? Were there different people voting? Does someone have no idea what they're doing? Is it both? Possibly. But the guy I'm talking about is Jalen Wilson from Kansas, who was an older player coming out of college, and one of those guys that I always have a level of skepticism about. An older player who dominates at that older age on really high usage, and that sort of stuff probably isn't real in an NBA context. But I like the way that Wilson played last season. He got some backup minutes at the 3 and the 4 for the Nets, and he acquitted himself pretty well. Now, he couldn't establish a full role all the way through. But now, in year 2, again, as that older prospect, Jalen is about to turn 24, he was great. 22 points, 4.5 triples a game. Now, we all immediately look at that and go, well, that's fake, clearly, because he hit 55% of his threes. So that's just not a realistic thing. But he showed an ability to shoot and score last season. 4 rebounds. But the problem here with this is, even though, again, he was the MVP, 26th in -1 and 53rd in points leagues with 29 points in 30 minutes, because not a single block, 0.6 steals, 1 assist. He just shot, they all went in, and he scored well. I think that Wilson can be an interesting player, maybe a rotation guy. Things need to thin out a little bit. What happens with Dorian Finney-Smith? Cam Johnson's there. Noah Clowney, who we'll talk about in a second, is by far a better prospect. And if Wilson's going to... These are like the Kansas Wilson numbers, like where it's like, I'm just taking shots. And they went in, and it looks great, but it's not a realistic NBA outcome for him, and it's not something that gets us super excited for fantasy. So while it's good, and he put up good numbers, and I think he can be a rotation player this season, this is not like, wow, I'm looking at Jalen Wilson as this sleeper pick in fantasy leagues. I don't think that's the case. And it might be the case that at some point during the season, he will be usable. I just don't think it's going to be immediately from the jump. There were, again, some other interesting players on this team. Keon Johnson was not signed, but during Summer League, he did get re-signed, that sounds terrible, re-signed back onto the Nets. And that's good because he was good. And much like Jaden Springer, he was, I think they played college together, didn't they? And they were in the same draft class. They were athletic guards who couldn't really shoot. Johnson is 22, so like again, 3rd year in the league. Is it 3rd or 4th? 4th year in the league. Still only 22, very young. He averaged 16 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.6 steals. Shot only 29% from 3, but 48 overall. The point guards on this team are 32-year-old Dennis Schroeder, hospital legend Ben Simmons, and that is it. And again, there is no young player coming through who they drafted who they're going to give these minutes to. I'm not, again, suggesting that Keon is going to be fantasy relevant, but I think there will be some moments where Johnson plays as a starter, and he always had a very intriguing skill set coming out of college, and he flashed it here. Good signs. Noah Clowney, at the end of last season, if you weren't paying attention, he was actually really good. He barely played and then started a bunch of games towards the end of the year. Now, I was hoping sort of that the Nets would just let Claxton go and they would consider Clowney their starting center. Or then I was hoping they'd trade Dorian Finney-Smith and consider Clowney their starting forward, and then neither of those things happened. I do think that Clowney is ahead of like a Day'Ron Sharpe in terms of the pecking order. And Clowney is still young. He just turned 20. He averaged 14 and 4 with 1.4 steals and 1.6 blocks. The shooting numbers are a little not ideal. I think, were those numbers correct? No, yeah, 14 and 4, 1.4 steals, 1.4 blocks. That's great. But, he shot 39% on threes. He hit over 2 threes a game. The 2 threes, 1.4 steals, 1.6 blocks is amazing. But when you watched him play, I didn't think he absolutely dominated through Summer League. Very similar, I think he's got a similar overall statistical profile to a Taylor Hendricks. Probably more defense versus Hendricks' offensive upside. If we're just talking upsides. But Clowney's a name that I'm going to watch that I would consider drafting over Jalen Wilson, over Keon Johnson if I'm taking flyers on guys, because if he's a 25-minute-a-night player, that might be enough. And I would hope that there is an opportunity for him to be able to start at some point this season and get those minutes. Because I do, at the moment, with the way this team is, there is Cam Thomas on this team, obviously, who's going to take every shot in the world. But in terms of prospects on this team who can be a consistent starter on the next good Nets team, I think it's Clowney, and that's probably it. I don't really know who else would be in that mix. The pimple Derek Whitehead was amazing in high school. He shot like 40% from three in college at Duke, but he got injured. And then last season he got injured again. And he was, to be absolutely brutally honest, putrid. But I'm going to give him a marginal pass. He was just returning from this foot surgery, and he's gone onto Twitter to talk about this and say, yeah, look, I was bad, but in my recovery process, there's a lot of stuff I still haven't done. He's like, I haven't done any explosive training work. I haven't done this part of my game. I'm still just shaking the rust off. And look, you could say that's an excuse or whatever, because you'd want some sort of excuse when you shoot 15% and 8% from three. Like, that's horrid. I'm not going to fully give up on him, though. He only averaged 16 fantasy points. He averaged 5 points per game, which of course is not. It's not good under anyone's idea of that. But almost a block, 1.3 steals, 4.5 rebounds. I'm not going to fully rule him out. I do think he can become a solid enough. Think about like a Bryce Sensabaugh in Utah, but I think Whitehead might have, or probably did have, a few other little tricks up his sleeve before the multiple foot injuries. And maybe that just ruins him. And that is really sad, because he was a guy that I thought could develop into a nice 6'6" shooting wing who can actually pass and defend, which is unbelievably valuable. This was hugely discouraging, but also we're remembering coming off the foot surgery, which has cost him basically 2 years. Jalen Martin is on a two-way with this team. He was fine. He's 20 years of age. He played 26 minutes. He shot 12% from three. He's a guy from Overtime Elite. Played with the Knicks, Westchester Knicks last season, and then with the Long Island Nets. He was sort of traded mid-season, I believe, in the G League. He's okay, but nothing exciting. And then Jacob Gilead, remember him, the two-way legend last season. He still currently isn't actually on a team. He's already 26. We know what he does. He gets a lot of steals. He gets a lot of assists. He's actually the proto Tyler Kolek, who we're going to talk about in a second, just in terms of overall fantasy skill sets. Let's talk about those New York Knickerbockers. And this is a team, obviously, that did have first-round picks, and I think they had 4 overall draft picks in this draft, but none of them super highly exciting, and they are run by the big fella, Tom Thibodeau, and there's not huge minutes available to anyone here on this squad, but we'll talk about them anyway. None of these guys are going to have any impact, I would think, throughout this season. The buzz of Summer League was this guy, though. Well, let me rephrase that. The buzz of the Knicks in Summer League, and then when you're talking to people, that they'd be names that people would bring up. This guy's name got brought up a lot, and that's Tyler Kolek, the car salesman. I'm not massively high on Kolek as a prospect. An older player who had some really good moments playing for Marquette, a little bit undersized, good passer, but I think overall ceiling is like a backup point guard. He's, I think, showed most of those things here. He was the 55th ranked player in -1 rankings. He played 27 minutes a night. He averaged 7 assists with 1.2 steals, but only 17 usage in a Summer League setting. Under 10 points. He shot 32% from three. 7 assists to 0.9 turnovers is great. It's fantastic. He showed that he could run an offense and he could pass unbelievably well. And that's a huge skill. But I'm a little worried about if he's doing more than that, much like I said with Jacob Gilead. Gets steals, gets assists. Kolek, I think, is going to be a better player than Gilead. But I'm a little worried that some of the grit, the lunch pail, the coach's son, the sneaky athleticness of Kolek may lead him at times to be a little overrated in terms of overall NBA upside and as a prospect. This season, I would say he's currently the 4th string point guard. Jalen Brunson, obviously. Juice McBride. They signed Cam Payne. And maybe Kolek is a better option than Payne. But it's Tom Thibodeau. And they brought in Payne for a reason. So I don't think that we're going to get any real value here from Kolek unless a bunch of other things, injuries, trades happen. And overall, I don't think he's a guy that I look at to be a starter. Good numbers, looked good in Summer League, really stable, which is, as a point guard, is great. You want that. But I think there is a limitation to what he can bring. He played 27 minutes a night, and actually I think one of the guys on this team was maybe not equally as impressive playing that same position, but the drop-off wasn't extreme. And that's not like a huge red flag, but it is something to note when we're talking about the value of what a Kolek brings. A Kolek is over 23 already. The guy that I am talking about, of course, that was, I thought, impressive as well, was Rokas Jokubaitis. Now, with Rokas, he's like almost 24 as well. He was drafted 2 years ago. He's not coming over anytime soon. He just signed a new contract with, completely blanking, someone in Europe, and I don't know who. Someone might be able to chime in the comments if you care about that. But there was literally an announcement. Maccabi Tel Aviv or Hapoel Tel Aviv. Well, a Tel Aviv team. Maybe he's going to be Pat Beverley legending himself there. But I thought Jokubaitis is, and even though I've got him fourth on this list here, he's probably the guy I want to talk about just because of the comparison to Kolek. Rokas played in 19 minutes a game, but 4 assists, 1.2 steals, shot 50% from three. He averaged 10 points. He, to me, looked like he could be a third-string point guard in the NBA, maybe a backup point guard. And it's, again, like, I didn't think there was when Kolek would go off and Jokubaitis would come on, I didn't think the drop-off was massive at all. I thought Rokas looked solid, and there'd be plenty of teams, I think, that could look at him if they were, and he was coming over, which he's not, and you could be a solid enough backup NBA point guard. The top of that list is Jacob Toppin, who did have some big athletic moments. He is on a two-way with his team. He played 26 minutes. I don't really think that he's an NBA player, and I don't really need to talk about him too much. Ariel Hakporti, 185th ranked player, 173rd in points leagues. He averaged 19 points, 8.7 rebounds. He seems like he's been a prospect around forever. He is huge. He is wide. He is strong. It is very, very easy for me to suggest that Hakporti could be a better backup center than what Jericho Sims is this season. But I don't think there's ever going to be a starting role necessarily for him outside of multiple injuries. But he was like, he sort of did the things that I wanted him to do. Their first round pick was Pacom Dadier. He is coming over this season. He has signed his rookie deal. He averaged 7 points on 31% with 0.2 steals and 0.2 blocks with 1 assist. He will play under 70 minutes total this season, I am pretty sure. He will just not play. Unless, again, there's a million injuries, and even then, it'll just be 45 minutes of Josh Hart, 70 minutes of Dante DiVincenzo. Dadier's got the size, and I think there is a chance he can develop into a solid enough rotation guy, but I am not convinced that there is going to be a for sure starter here, and I am very certain that he will do nothing this season. The last guy on that list is Dwayne Washington Jr. I'd bring him up, because he's a scorer. He averaged 15 points in 23 minutes. He had big usage. People love the guys that score, but it's the same thing with him all the time. It's scoring. The efficiency is not always there, and that's just a guy that's fine, but not any sort of NBA prospect, I don't think. Okay. So that's going to bring us, we've got 2 more teams to talk about in this division, and the next one of those is the Philadelphia 76ers, who were a team that, again, you think about it, are they like flush with elite draft picks or players? Not really. But there was still a lot of guys on this team that are going to be on their main roster because of the way they cleared out all their cap space. There's a lot of guys who are going to have opportunities at times. Their first round pick was Jared McCain. The TikTok legend had 12 points a game. He had 28 usage. Now, he didn't shoot well, 26% from 3, 29% from the field. All that is terrible. But we've said this over and over again. Shooting percentages for rookies don't really mean anything in terms of future NBA success. I like the fact that he had a 28 usage, that he sort of took control and said, well, I'm in charge here. I'm going to take these pull-up threes. I'm going to be aggressive. 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal. The 2 assists is a little troubling because also when he played at Duke, he was just not an assist guy. So maybe he's more of a combo guard, and that's where I worry about his defensive issues and his lack of size next to Tyrese Maxey. But he was an elite shooter coming out of Duke. It just didn't show here. 141st in -1 and 135th in points with 22 fantasy points, which is fine. Yeah, they've got Kyle Lowry, they've got Tyrese Maxey, there's Kelly Oubre who will play the 2. So McCain, I think, will have moments where he is in the rotation, but it will be very limited. And he, like nearly all rookie guards, will shoot some really bad percentages, and he'll just be a source of threes streaming, even if he gets enough minutes to get there. But the signs there, even though those numbers aren't stellar, the aggression, the getting his own shot, the confidence, I thought was really encouraging. And I do think that even though, again, those numbers don't look awesome, that there were positives to take out of his Summer League performance. They had a bunch of other guys who, again, we probably just need to know a little bit about their names. Jeff Doughton Jr., who was signed, he played for the Magic and then signed with the Sixers late in the season and had a few little moments. And then he hadn't signed on it. I think he's an NBA rotation player, and they just actually re-signed him to a 2-way contract. again, doesn't mean that he's going to play any sort of a huge role, but I do think that Doughton over the last couple of years has done enough to suggest that he probably even deserves more than a two-way, to be honest. He averaged 17 and 6 on 48% shooting. He shot 58 from 2. He is 27. He's just a solid enough player that if you need to get a couple of minutes in there, like, he can do that. Ricky Council IV started last season on a two-way deal and was converted late in the year. Now, he is a hyper-aggressive player. Big dunks, big aggression, big scoring volume. And he did what you wanted a second-year player to do. He is 23, but he averaged 19 points. He averaged 1.4 steals. He only shot 29% from 3, and that's part of the issue with him that was coming out of Arkansas, Arkansas is where he finished up in college. But he shot the free throw as well. He just looked, aggressive. And now that he is on a full-time deal, and there is a lack of forwards on this squad, he might actually, haven't done the projections of them, he might be a rotation player. Not that we need to care that much for fantasy, because even though his numbers are fine, 30 fantasy points is okay, but you want a little bit more, because he's a little bit of an empty scorer. But I do think that he can sort of hang in an NBA environment. Their center was Adembona, who was an early pick, not a two-way guy, or early second-round pick, not a two-way guy, signed to a full contract. And I do think that he will make a really strong backup center. Not this season, because Drummond's got that role, but Boner, I think, is going to turn into quite a good player. 22 minutes, 6 and 5, almost 3 blocks, over a steal. He's a little short, but in the Paul Reed mold of short centers, he just gets stuff done. He's a defensive event creator. He's athletic. He's fast. He jumps. Don't think there's going to be any shooting or anything like that, but he is a solid enough long-term backup center, I think. There's no other player like David Jones, and he signed a two-way contract there. I hate that the name is just so boring. He averaged 9 points in 18 minutes, 39% shooting. Honestly, when I watched the Sixers, and I watched 2 of their games live, he didn't really stand out at all. Justin Edwards was one of those high-level high school recruits who just crashed and burned and didn't get drafted, signed a two-way, and fine, take that flyer on him. Didn't impress, though. Didn't do anything that was exciting. Shot poorly. Averaged 8 points in 21 minutes. The guy that popped more as an undrafted player, and he's actually not on a roster at the moment, is Judah Mintz. Judah Mintz is athletic, got up some big dunks. He has some real shot selection and shooting issues and shot 17% from 3, which is horrid. But what he does do is get to the line. Almost 6 attempts a game, 80% shooting. He averaged 10 points with 1.3 steals. I would hope that someone gives him a two-way chance. I think he's at least that level of player, but there are concerns about the shooting and about some of the shot selection stuff. But again, if we're looking at the way that he played, or David Jones or Justin Edwards in terms of the pop factor, Mintz definitely stood out in that scenario. Doesn't mean that he's going to be a good NBA player, but I wanted to highlight him just because probably could have been drafted, and he just showed enough stuff, especially that free throw drawing, which I think can become important. Final team is your Toronto Raptors, my Toronto Raptors, our Toronto Raptors. And I couldn't get enough of watching this Raptors team. And as you all are well aware, when I am watching the Raptors, all I want to see is Dick. And Grade A Dick played. Grade A Dick was solid. Grade A Dick was doing, I think, some of the things we wanted. Was it awesome from Grade A? Not really. It was very interesting that in the game that I watched of Toronto, he was putting himself and taking charges and diving on the ball and into the crowd. Like, Grady, what are you doing? This is not what you're here for. He only played 2 games and he only played 19 minutes a game, so they were being a little bit cautious with him. But 38 usage is a lot. 11 points and 7 rebounds. And that was what stood out to me, is how aggressively he was crashing the glass. 3 assists is strong. Now, he didn't shoot well at all. In fact, somehow, the man that many people thought was the best shooter in the entire draft last year hit 0 threes. He was 0 of 9 from 3. Now, obviously, that is a very small sample, but we would have hoped for a little bit more than that. Dick still, despite not hitting a single 3, averaged 24 fantasy points in 19 minutes. That's really good. Really high usage. And I would expect that we enter the season and Dick starts. It's Barrett, Dick, Quickly, Barnesy, and Pirtle. I don't really see what other direction they would go. And that would probably mean that we take a late flyer on Dick in a fantasy league, and he will probably disappoint and we will drop him. But they said be like a high volume player, be aggressive. He did all that. The shots didn't fall, but there were some encouraging signs there with what Gradey was producing. The rest of the Raptors team actually did have a lot of guys on their roster. In fact, there's 6 other players who are going to be a part of their roster for this season that played in Summer League. One of those was pick number 45, Jamal Shed, undersized point guard from Houston, really, really dynamite defensive player. 21 minutes a game, he averaged 8 points. Part of my concern with Shed was the size of him. Defense, not a problem at all. Like, he was really good and he hounded guys like full court. He averaged 1.2 steals in 20 minutes, but only 27% shooting from 3. Now, he shot the ball really well at Houston, but that sort of a size of a player always gives me that concern and a little bit of like, is he just going to project as an awesome shooter or as a defender who had some shooting luck? And I leant more towards the second part of that, and that's how it looked in Summer League. Not representative of what happens in the NBA. But now he has to compete with Quickly as the starter, but also Davion Mitchell as the backup. And I just don't think we're going to see much from Shed, and I don't fully believe in him as a long-term, even like high-level backup. I just didn't love him as a player. The size, the offensive question marks were too much for me, and the defense checked out. The other stuff, not really. And that's sort of, confirmed my thoughts on him. I also hated their pick of Gary Trent III, Lonnie Walker V, Jacoby Walter. Picked him at number 19, and he was one of those guys who was very inefficient, pretty bad shot selection at Baylor, and I didn't really know what else he was bringing, hence the Trent and Walker comparisons. What does he bring if it's not inefficient shooting? And watching him, he was like, I thought lost. I thought he played really poorly, and he just lent into it's not even the stereotypes. He just lent into the style of game that he had at Baylor. He played Jacoby 24 minutes a night and averaged 12 points, which would say is okay. 1 assist, 0.4 steals, 35% shooting, 21 from 3. Again, the shooting numbers don't always carry across, but I need to see more from this guy. I did not like the pick. He is young. He takes good volume of threes. I just think it's going to be a rough and long ride. And when he does, or if he does, actually turn into a solid NBA contributor, I'm not sure it's actually going to be good for fantasy at all. One of the players that I was the most interested to see across all of Summer League was Cameroonian legend Ulrich Chomsky. And I'm glad that Masai took that flyer on him at pick 57. I would have gone much earlier on him. He is the youngest player in this draft, and he has tantalizing upside. As a rebounder, as a shot blocker, as a defender, honestly, there's some shooting there as well. Was he good? No. Were there good moments? Yes. And that's encouraging. Like, he is going to do nothing this season. He's going to be a two-way guy who, once we get to the start of April, will start games for this team as they tank their asses off. He will start games and have some games where he goes for 17 and 12 with 3 blocks on 40% shooting as a big man. I think that'll happen 2 or 3 times. But it's going to be a long road. Watching him defensively, he was completely lost. Like, at times, he just didn't know where he was. His head was in the complete wrong direction. He got lost a million times. But then he'd get up with ridiculous blocks, grab the ball off the backboard, dribble it up the court, and dunk on someone's head, and you go, holy shit, what's this? That is the appeal of him, because he's just learning basketball. He's young, he's athletic, there's shooting, there's shot blocking, it's all there. It's just going to take a long time. Chomsky only averaged 4 points, but 1.4 blocks in 19 minutes. He shot 50% from 3. Again, that is really limited. I think he only went 1 of 2 across the games. But enough there that makes me go, yeah, he should have been drafted. And it's going to take time, but the skills were obvious. Brandon Carlson's on a 2-way. He's a big man who spaces the floor. He was already 25, but he was their best producer. He averaged 10 points with 1.5 threes. He shot 33% from 3. He blocked 2.5 shots. Just a solid enough G League-ish type player. Jonathan Mobo was another really interesting player. I was a bit concerned about some of the height reports from him and how small people thought he was. He looked massive. I don't know where that came from. He looked huge out there. Mobo played only 13 minutes a night, though. 3 and 3 with 2 assists. A lot of the stuff that we knew about him, like aggressive rebounder, solid, really strong passing as a small ball 5/4, but a lack of shooting, it all showed out. And the fact that he played so few minutes is a little red flaggy. I think he can develop into a pretty good player, but again, it's going to be a garbage time, junk time, tank time season special later in the year where him and Chomsky maybe start games together. When Olynyk is traded or hurt or Pirtle shut down and Barnes, whatever happens, there are going to be opportunities there for him. The last guy is Ochai Agbaji, who is just bad. He was bad. I thought a bad prospect coming out of college. He was bad in Utah. He was bad in Utah the next year. He was bad in Toronto. And he was bad in his third summer league. Agbaji played 23 minutes tonight and had 6 points on 36%. He didn't have a single block and he averaged 1 assist per game. I don't know what he is. What is he? A 6'6" power forward who rebounds the ball well? And that's it? He will have moments this season where he does start. Because, again, he's there. He's got some experience. But Dick and Walter, as much as I don't like Walter, they are going to supersede him very quickly. And I think that Agbaji is not an NBA player. Long term, I just don't think he is. He's got a terrible fantasy game as well. And he just looked bad again. And I don't think I've ever really seen anything positive from Ochai Agbaji. The Raptors should be prioritizing Dick and Walter to see what they can bring because I just don't think it's there for Agbaji. And Agbaji is 24 already. And this was year 3. Just not a good showing at all. But I do hope that this show was a good showing. And if it was, well, you can go ahead and chuck me a thumb and double bang it and all of that stuff, which helps out immensely. Guys, we're back with the Pacific Division to wrap up all of Summer League. Coming up later today. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone.